I was born into a life I was never allowed to remember. That's what the shelter worker told me as I sat there, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of warm coffee I didn't even taste. His words kept echoing in my head. You were stolen. I wanted to reject it. I wanted to laugh and walk away. But something deep inside me was already breaking, like a locked door finally forced open. I told him he was wrong. I told him I grew up moving from one foster home to another, that no one ever came looking for me. I said if anyone wanted me, they would have found me. He looked at me with a sadness that felt heavier than my own pain. He said records were changed, names were altered, and files were buried on purpose. He said some people are very good at making others disappear, especially when money and fear are involved. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on a thin mattress staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet breathing of strangers around me. Memories I never understood started to make sense. The woman in my dreams, always crying, always reaching for me. The sound of a door slamming. The feeling of being carried away. I always thought they were nightmares. Now I wondered if they were memories. The next morning, the shelter worker returned with an old file. It was thin, yellowed, and worn at the edges, like it had been touched many times but never opened fully. Inside was a photo of a little boy with messy hair and scared eyes. It was me. Under the photo was a different name, not Daniel Cross, a name I had never heard before. And below that, a date marked in red, the day I vanished. He told me my parents were wealthy, not famous, but powerful in quiet ways. They owned businesses, had connections, and trusted the wrong people. He told me someone close to them wanted what they had, and the easiest way to take it was to erase me. Without a child, contracts changed, trust shifted, control moved hands. I felt sick. My whole life, I thought I was unwanted, that no one fought for me. But the truth was worse. Someone fought against me. I asked about my parents. He hesitated before speaking. He said my mother never stopped searching. She spent years knocking on doors, hiring investigators, begging the police to keep looking. People called her crazy. They told her to move on. My father tried to stay strong, but losing a child hollowed him out. Their marriage didn't survive the waiting. Their lives slowly fell apart, and the people who caused it, they moved on. They lived comfortably. They smiled in family photos and shook hands at public events. That's when something changed inside me. All those years on the streets, all the nights I went hungry, all the times I was treated like nothing. It wasn't just bad luck. It was the result of someone else's choice, someone else's betrayal. I didn't want money. I didn't want apologies. I wanted truth. The shelter worker helped me contact someone who still remembered my case, an old investigator who had been pushed aside years ago. When he saw me, his hands shook just like the shelter workers had. He said he knew I was alive. He just never had proof. Now he did. Piece by piece, the story came together. Names I recognized from documents. Faces I had seen once at family gatherings before everything went dark. The people who smiled at me as a child were the same ones who signed papers that erased me. One of them was my uncle. The word felt wrong in my mouth. He was trusted. He handled finances. He had access. When I disappeared, he was the one who stepped in to help. He took control of assets. He comforted my parents while quietly making sure I was never found. I wondered how someone could live with that. How someone could sleep at night knowing they destroyed a child's life. Then I realized something else. People like him don't feel guilt. They feel victory. I stayed silent while we gathered evidence. I didn't want him to know I existed. I wanted him comfortable, confident. I wanted him to think the past was buried forever. Meanwhile, I rebuilt myself slowly. Not with anger on the outside, but with patience. I learned my real name. I learned my history. I learned how much had been taken from me, and how carefully it had been hidden. The day I finally stood in front of him again, he didn't recognize me. Why would he? To him, I was a ghost that never came back. I watched his face change as the truth reached him. Confusion first, then fear, then something close to panic when he realized the past had finally caught up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten him. I didn't need to. The truth did all the damage on its own. When everything came out, the world saw him differently. The respect he enjoyed disappeared overnight. Doors that once opened easily were suddenly closed. People stopped answering his calls. His power vanished the same way my childhood had. Quietly, completely. I met my mother later. She cried when she saw me. Not the loud kind of crying, but the kind that comes from years of holding pain inside. She said she never stopped believing I was alive. She said every birthday, she lit a candle and waited. I realized then that revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about reclaiming what was stolen. My name, my story, my life. Some betrayals take everything from you. But sometimes, if you survive long enough, the truth brings it back. And the people who thought they won learn the hardest lesson of all. Nothing buried in life stays buried for. I thought knowing the truth would bring me peace. Instead, it opened wounds I didn't even know I had. After the shelter night, after the file and the photo, and the name that was supposed to be mine, I couldn't go back to living like nothing had changed. Every step I took felt heavier, like I was walking with someone else's past on my back. I had spent 25 years believing I was abandoned. Now I knew I was erased. There is a difference, and it hurts in a way that is hard to explain. The investigator arranged a quiet meeting in a small office far from the city center. The walls were bare, the lights dim, like the room itself was tired of secrets. He laid out documents on the table, one by one, slowly, as if he didn't want to overwhelm me. But every paper felt like a punch to the chest. Birth records altered. Missing child reports closed without reason. Statements that didn't match timelines. Names crossed out and rewritten. My real name appeared again and again, hidden under layers of false information. The walls were bare, the lights dim, like the room itself was tired of secrets. He laid out documents on the table, one by one, slowly, as if he didn't want to overwhelm me. But every paper felt like a punch to the chest. Birth records altered. Missing child reports closed without reason. Statements that didn't match timelines. Names crossed out and rewritten. My real name appeared again and again, hidden under layers of false information. Someone had worked very hard to make sure I was never found. I asked him how it was possible. How no one noticed. How no alarm went off. He leaned back in his chair and said something I will never forget. When the people involved wear clean suits and speak politely, the world rarely asks questions. That sentence explained my entire life. I remembered moments from my childhood that never made sense. The foster home, where I was moved suddenly without explanation. The couple who seemed ready to adopt me, then disappeared overnight. The social worker who avoided my eyes whenever I asked about my parents. I always thought it was bad luck. Now I saw the pattern. Someone was watching. Someone was interfering. The investigator told me my uncle didn't act alone. He had help. Lawyers who knew how to delay. Officials who looked the other way. And money that kept everyone comfortable and quiet. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, years had passed. Leads went cold. Hope faded. But my mother never gave up. He showed me letters she had written. To police stations. To government offices. To private investigators. Page after page of the same question, written in different words. Please help me find my son. I had to stop him there. My chest felt tight. I had lived my life believing no one wanted me, while she was somewhere in the world, writing letters into the dark, waiting for an answer that never came. That was when the anger arrived. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that makes you scream or break things. The quiet kind. The kind that settles deep and stays there. I didn't want to confront anyone yet. I didn't want apologies or explanations. I wanted to understand everything first. I wanted to see how deep the betrayal went. So I stayed invisible. I let my uncle continue living his perfect life, posting smiling photos, attending events, giving interviews about family values and success. Every time I saw his face, I felt something twist inside me. This was the man who held me as a child, the man I trusted, the man who decided I was a problem that needed to disappear. I started working small jobs, saving money, rebuilding myself quietly, not because I had to, but because I wanted control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being moved around by someone else's decisions. Every step I took was mine. At night, I wrote everything down. Every memory, every feeling, every detail the investigator shared with me. I didn't know yet how I would use it, but I knew one thing. The truth deserved a voice. One evening, the investigator called me and said he found something new. A document that was never meant to be seen. A transfer of guardianship signed during the exact week I vanished. It gave my uncle temporary control over certain assets, until the child was located. The child was never meant to be located. That paper changed everything. It proved intent. It proved planning. It proved betrayal. I stared at that document for a long time. My hands were steady, but my heart was not. This wasn't just about a lost childhood anymore. This was about justice, about accountability, about exposing a lie that had been protected for decades. I realized something then. My uncle didn't just steal my life. He built his on top of it. And soon, very soon, he was going to find out what happens when the foundation of a lie begins to crack. Because the child he erased was no longer missing. He was coming back.